welcome. Let's get stitching here. So just really quick, looking at what's in your kit, we have the printed fabric. These guidelines are permanent, so make sure you cover them with your stitches. You're going to have a floss card with DMC colors. I'm going to show you how to use that here in a second. And you're also going to have a hoop. Your hoop will not be bound when you get it. It'll look more like this. I like to bind mine with just scraps of fabric. And what that does is it makes it so it's easier to get good tension here when you sandwich up your fabric, which is going to look like this. And that just adds a little extra padding here. You're not going to frame it like that. That's just to help you with the stitching. So make sure you tighten your hoop up really, really well, as tight as you can make it, and go around and pull out any excess all the way around. Right? You want to be able to hear it. If you tap it and it starts sagging, it's not tight enough. All right. Okay. Excellent. You're going to need some small scissors, and your kit is going to come with some needles. I just have mine in a little pin cushion here, so it's easier for me to grab. Okay. So with your floss card, you're going to need to undo this knot that's supposed to keep them from getting too wild. The first color we're going to use actually is this purple. So I'm going to just grab this out. So these are yard lengths. It's up to you if you want to work with the full yard length on your needle, or if you want to cut this in half and work with an 18-inch length. There's benefits to both. If you work with the full yard length, you have a greater chance of tangles. But if you're working with 18-inch length, you're going to have to switch threads more often, right? You're going to run out of thread sooner. Okay, so these are 6-stranded. So if you look at the end of your floss, you'll probably see it kind of fraying a little bit. That's where you want to start grabbing. So what we're going to do with this color in particular, check your instructions for, what color you're using and how many strands to use. But we're going to start with this color, and we only need 3 strands. So it's up to you. The safest way to do this is to pull out one at a time. I'm going to do 3 at a time just to see if we can speed it up a little bit. So as you start pulling them apart, actually this is going way better than I would have hoped. Sometimes you can get some weird tangling happening on the full strand, but I'm kind of using my thumbs here to keep those tangles from getting out of control. I'm letting them kind of untwist as I pull. See, that's what I'm talking about there. So I'm gonna let it untwist, keep going. So we're going to take this, and you're gonna grab a needle. You're gonna have 2 sizes of needles in your kit. I'm giving my ends a little bit of a lick because it's gonna make it easier. Okay, this needle is probably too small, and it's not focusing. It's so small, my camera doesn't even want to focus on it. That would be a good needle for using a single ply. That one's also too small. Should have had it ready to go, Jessica. Okay, this one looks better. All right, so if the needle you're trying isn't working, then move up to a bigger size. This should be fun, not frustrating. All right, so I have my floss here on my needle. You can see how long my length is because I am using that full yard. So I don't know if you can see how it's overlapped. I want to make sure when I'm stitching, I'm only using this section here that's the 3-ply. I don't want it to overlap and use the 6-ply, okay? That'll make more sense as we get going. So to start, if you want, you can just tie a little knot at the end. Like, it's okay. I know a lot of people are against that. I'll show you another way to do it if you want to try a different way. So we are going to start on this flower, and you can see there's a different color marking on the inside of the flower. That's where we're starting. We're going to use satin stitch and fill in all those little areas there. And the stitch direction is all kind of pointing towards the center of the flower here. So I'm going to go to this biggest one here. I think this one's kind of the widest. And I'm going to anchor my floss here, like hidden away, because I know it's going to get covered with these stitches. So how I'm going to do that is I'm just going inside here, and I'm going to pull my thread so I have a little tail, and I'm going to hold it with my finger because I don't want to pull through. I'm going to go down like that. Then I'm going to either, you can come up in the center. I'm actually going to come out to the side just a tiny little bit here. And I'm going to pierce this teeny little stitch I made. And I made a little knot because my thread is so long. Once again, if you make your thread shorter, you probably won't have those problems as often. So there we go. That's kind of like a starter knot you can do. It's nice and secure. And what's going to happen is I'm going to start doing my stitches on top of that. So when I do satin stitch, I like to start in the center of my shape first. Oops. So I'm going to come down here. These are very, very tiny. So, I mean, some of them will only be a stitch. Some of them will be, a lot of them will just probably be 3 stitches. So I think this is going to be 4 stitches. And it's okay if you go over the line a little bit. It's okay if you don't cover it all the way. Because we're going to come back, we're going to add more stitches to this. Okay, so now I'm going to go, it really doesn't matter like where you start on here. I'm going to do this kind of, this one's probably the trickiest, this like teeny little petal here. So you're doing this teeny tiny stitches. You have to talk like that when you're talking about the tiny stitches. We're just trying to get a little bit of color. Okay, once again, drawback of too much thread. Alright, so I have a couple of stitches left here. I will do. So the point of this purple is to help the petals in front stand out. So for this back one here, you can see how I'm kind of wrapping my stitches around this shape here so that the petals won't all merge together as one big blob. I think that looks good. So I just want to show you what's going on in the back here. There's my tail from before. So just to finish off this floss, I'm going to just weave through a couple stitches. If you want to be really secure, you can do it twice. And then you're just going to take your little scissors and snip. I'm actually going to snip this as well while I'm here. Then, if you want, so once you grab your next color, which is this very pale purple, you can likewise do the same thing to anchor it. So I'm just going to pick a chunk of stitches to weave through. And you can just maybe leave a little longer tail than that. And do it again. And we have an anchor again. All right. So what I'm going to do with this color is I am going to outline what I just did with some back stitches. So when I did these on my sample hoop, they don't have to be super tiny. They can be. It kind of depends on what sort of texture you want. You know, if you do smaller back stitches, you're going to get, you know, little tiny bumps, almost like little pearls or something. Here I'm doing mine a little bit longer. But this This will just help us because our next color is going to be white. So this is just a little in-between color. Oops, I just got caught on myself. So like with this one, I'm going to come down a little bit beyond so that we end up getting a little bit of this color behind here, like that. All right. This middle one, again, it's very teeny tiny and crowded here in the middle. Don't worry about being too precise. I'm just going to do like a stitch on one side. I have that teeny tiny one, and a stitch on the other side. There's really not enough room to do stitches on top. You can see I just pulled some floss through from the back. That was just my tail. So I'm just going to pick it back out if I can. No, I didn't. Let's see here, there it goes. If all else fails, you can always trim it from the front as well. Alright, so just keep going, doing these back stitches, and then we'll meet back up. I'll be back, I'll be on a hoop stand, so I won't be moving so much at that point. I just wanted to make sure I could show you the back of my work easier. Okay, so now I am working with white. It may help during this part to kind of look at a blown up picture, you know, if you have the PDF or if you're looking at a printout, to see what's going on in the center, because it is getting very crowded here, right? And you know what, if you don't do it perfect and like your stitches are in the wrong direction or whatever, it's gonna be fine. Okay, so this, please don't get turned off. This is probably the hardest part of the design. So let's just get it over with. So as you can see, it's, you know, over here I can see, okay, I have a petal here, I have a petal here. In the middle, it's like, what on earth is going on, Jessica? So there is a petal, an oval petal like this. It's supposed to be kind of like the side view of a petal. So I'm going to start here filling in with satin stitch. I can probably get in one stitch over here. And a couple over here. It's so tiny, it's likely not to translate so well to the eyes, but we needed something in the center of the flower, so. If in the end you see your flower and you're like, I don't like it, it's a big blob, you can always go back and like outline each petal. You could do it with maybe a single strand of the darker purple. So I'm just doing enough satin stitches here. I just kind of want to, actually it's probably good. So then like my next petal, I'm going to do this one here. So I'm starting in the center. So it's a little tricky, right? Because I have a petal above and a petal below, kind of working around. I'm just stitching up to that back stitch. And as you go, you're slowly going to start to see this thing come together. It's definitely going to go through an awkward phase. If you like, if you have a little bit more experience, want to try something else, you could always thread paint this flower using these same colors and just do all of this with long and short stitch. It's very, very tiny, so a little tricky. Also, I wanted to mention, so, you know, we just finished up with that light purple color. So save all your scraps because we're going to do, let's see, I kind of skipped a stitch right here. I need to add in. Yes, save your scraps. We're going to be using all the floss. Try not to lose track of it. And at the end, you know, when you've stitched all the elements you want to stitch, you can always go back and add more using whatever you have left over, or even adding with your own colors if you have a stash at home. All right, see how we got this petal now? All right, so now I'm going to do this one, I think. So here I need to make sure I'm covering the guidelines because nothing else is going to be stitched behind this petal. So make sure when you come up, you're coming up just to the outside of it. It's better to kind of go over a little bit than to go under and have that guideline showing. Luckily the guidelines aren't too wild looking. I actually have this little gap here. I think it's supposed to be filled in more with this petal. Once again, hang in there. If this just isn't working at all for you, you could always just, well, there's a few things you could do. You could just do the entire petal, each petal, instead of breaking it up into these 3 pieces. Just do the whole petal in satin stitch. You could always do the center with the darker color, and then as you move out, move to this lighter color, and then do the far out petals as white, or do the complete opposite of what I just said. Totally up to you. See, I'm seeing like a little gap right here, which is that middle petal. I need to get in one little stitch here. All right, so now I'm going to do this petal. So I'm kind of working from the petals on top, center petals, and then doing the petals behind. So yeah, I think that satin stitch modification would probably be best bet. I would definitely, if you do decide to do that, use a good amount of the white, because that's what it's kind of on the floss card for. So you know you'll have enough of the other colors for the other elements. Oops, I have a little knot back here. Getting some kind of tangle back there. Excellent. So now I have a full 6-ply of this purple. I grabbed a new strand off my floss card, and we're going to work on these flowers here. We're going to use 6-ply for the 3 petals in the front for each flower. So we're going to fill with detached chain stitch. So I'm going to show you this small flower first. There's 2 ways to do this. You could start from the outside and work in, or work from the inside and work out. I'm going to do inside out. When we did embroidery bingo last month, I kind of experimented with both and actually realized that mine look a little better when I start from the inside, contrary to what I had thought. So I'm just going to do a detached chain stitch. I caught my loop. I'm going to anchor. I guess the tricky part, if you're starting from the inside, is to know how big to make that first one. So when I do my next one, you can either come up the same holes. I'm actually going to come up on just right next to where I came up for the first one. So technically, it's not a detached chain stitch because it's not, you know, we're not coming in and out the same hole, but I think we can let it pass. All right, so here's my loop. I'm going to come up at the top. I'm actually going to come up where I went down from the previous one, the previous anchor. Excuse me, the previous anchor stitch. And then I'm just going to pull. And I'm, you know, if I pull too tight, I'm going to squeeze that inner stitch, and I don't want to do that. So I'm just kind of tugging till it's laying flat, and then I'm going to come down. I'm holding here these stitches, mostly out of paranoia, just because I don't want to like wreck anything by pulling too tight. All right, let's do another one. So for the inner, I'm going to actually come up here. Oopsies. Again, it's like hard to know. What would we call this? Maybe I'm 2/3 of the way up. The length there. I'm going to come down here. Once I come down, because I'm coming down the thickness of a strand, so more like 3/4 the length of the petal. Here I'm a little nervous because it's like, am I going to be able to cover my guidelines? I mean, luckily in this case, there's leaves behind here, so if I don't cover my guidelines, it'll be fine. You know, I can cover it with the leaf stitching. It's more like this one, actually, okay, so this petal and then these 2 petals are the only ones that have like a background to worry about. Actually, I think I have, oh no, this is the leaf back here too. So it's just that one you need to worry about. And it was fine. So I didn't need to worry at all. All right, so you're going to continue. Same thing here. For the back petals, you're going to do 3-ply instead of 6. For these petals, I think we need to do 3. So I'm going to start at the center. When I say at the center, I'm like center of the leaf, right? Like, or petal, oh my goodness. The center of the base of it. So I'm just going to make this first stitch, I guess, half. I'm kind of just looking to this one to see, like, okay, if I added another one, it's basically going to be this plus an extra one on top. So I'm aiming to have my first stitch be this length of that, like it was before. So I'm going to go about halfway. If you need to draw with like a pen or something, pencil. Okay, I have like, I don't know if you can see my floss has kind of a situation here. I'm going to go with it. I came up through that same hole and actually pierced myself. Okay, I don't know, that might be too small. We'll see. We'll see what happens. Of course, that's what I said before, so. And it was fine. There's two. Now for this, I don't want to go really any further out. So I'm gonna come up the same hole I used before and pull back whatever I just pulled forward. So just be careful when you use those same holes that you don't disrupt the previous stitches. So here you may have to kind of tease. Use your needle to kind of encourage the floss to lay how you want it to lay. Something like that. All right, I think that looks good. So continue doing that and I'll meet you back. So when we do these back petals with only 3 ply, on this larger flower you can actually fit in 4 of the detached chain stitches. However, by the time you're at the 4th one, I really wouldn't call it a detached chain stitch anymore. I'd call it a fly stitch, because as you move along here, you're basically moving out. So a little bit more dramatic than it was for the front petals. Now if you're doing this and you're finding yourself getting kind of caught up on those front petals, it's absolutely okay to do these back petals first. I'm all caught up here, excuse me. So since we have fewer ply, these back ones aren't as poofy. Hopefully they look like they are behind. But they also take a little bit more stitching to fill the shape. So by now you can see we're definitely doing more of a fly stitch than a detached chain stitch. All right. So once you get over here, we have some overlapping going on. I'm going to do the front petal first. So I'll probably can do 3 stitches. Who are you? Had a weird loop there for a second. 1. 2. And 3. So for that final petal, you can see it's very covered. So we can guess our center stitch would be here. So you can just do like a, let's see, we could just probably do almost like satin stitches here, faking it. Go. And I'll do a final one here. like that. Okay, so next we're going to work on our leaf here in the back. Both of these leaves are going to be done with satin stitch using 2-ply. If you would like, you can always come in with a pen and draw in your guidelines for yourself. Basically, I did guidelines something like this, a diagonal to that center line. One tricky thing is we have a big flower here, so it's kind of up to you. Do you want to stitch this first and then do the satin stitch afterwards, or the other way around? I think I'm going to do the other way around and just leave tiny gaps here so I have an idea of where this flower is going to be. If I completely cover this guideline, I won't know where this flower goes. Now, is it going to be hard to kind of just guess? No, you can absolutely just cover it. Same with this flower here. When you're, after you've stitched, if this flower ends up over here versus here, like, it's really, really not the end of the world. It's going to be fine. So when I do the satin stitch, I'm going to start on this leaf since it's in front of that one. And I'm going to start on one of my guidelines. Make sure you cover that guideline, that edge. And just start going. I'll go up first. As you go up, you're gonna have to slightly modify the angle as you get to the very tippy top. If you want to just use a single strand, that's fine. You can see I kind of messed up there. There's like a little hole. I may have to come back and fill that in. So as I get near the top, I'm kind of, occasionally I'll share a hole at the bottom there. Like these 2 stitches, they just went down the same hole. And that allows me to kind of change my stitch angle. That one I just kind of tucked under, so that by the time I get all the way to the top, my stitch direction is the same as the vein here, kind of parallel with the vein, so that we can get that nice pointed tip at the top. Like that. Alright, and I'm going to go back down. When you go down, you don't really have to worry about that stitch direction changing. I'm going to cut this into like 2 little pieces. So 1 stitch there, and then 1 stitch here. And the reason for that is I don't want it to cover up. If I go straight across, there's a possibility of it kind of covering the edge of these stitches. So if you break it up like that. Alright, so back down I go. I do have a good tutorial on the website on satin stitch that lets you, kind of gives you some ideas for doing some practice work with it. If you just go on the website and search for satin stitch, it should be one of the first things that pops up. It's the satin stitch tutorial. So take a look at that if you need some practice. And that's what this takes. Satin stitch is not easy. It looks easy, but it really takes a lot of practice to get your stitches laying flat, to get your edges looking really nice. You may do a stitch and decide, oh, it doesn't look good. It's okay to stop, remove the floss from your needle, and redo the stitch. Because it's a lot to think about, you need to pay attention to exactly where you're coming up and exactly where you're going down. All right, obviously I skipped ahead a little. So we did the satin stitch here on these larger leaves. Here you can see where I kind of left a halo of where that, I was going to call it a star. It is a flower, where that flower is going to be. It doesn't have to be perfect because I'm actually going to cover up. It was just so I kind of knew where the center of the flower was going to be and which direction the petals went. Then I moved on to these leaves, these skinny spiky leaves. So we're going to fill these using 2-ply and stem stitch. So for this one, we come up at the base of our line. I like to do it in rows to get that texture. So we're going to go down along our guideline, leave kind of our loop out of the way, come up along the guideline in between those two spots, and then pull. Go back down. And continue. Oops. So you can see I'm putting my that loop, I'm putting it above. You could also put it below. Whichever way you decide to do it, just be consistent. One technically has a different name, but as long as you're consistent, you're gonna get a pretty similar effect. So I just continue doing rows of it to fill the space. So here, it's like I can come down here and do another stitch, or just make one big stitch to fill this all the way in, which is what I'm going to do. Just come down there. This one will also just be 2 stitches. You can make them smaller if you want. Just be consistent. Oops. Okay, where'd that peach color come from? What? I'm not using any peach. Let's just be, I mean, there's floss all over my house. All kinds of colors, all over my clothes. That's funny. I'm kind of picking from the back there. I don't know if you saw that white fuzz was kind of poking up. I just kind of plucked it from the back to get it to disappear. So at this point, our space is so small, we're pretty much just going to be doing satin stitches down here. Mirror you. So I'm noticing the other leaf I did over here. You can kind of see some gaps at the base, which I didn't notice earlier, but I just noticed. So we're actually going to come in and sneak in some stitches. So I'm just going to add a stitch here. If you need to come in and sneak some stitches, I'm not going to tell anybody. Get you one here too. Here, it never happened. So also you can see I came in and just filled in the space between the flowers. And you can use whatever stitching you want in here. I mean, mine's just kind of like a random direction stitching. So that's just kind of like background leaves. We're not really too concerned about that. All right, so after you do those, you can move on to these branched leaves. And we're going to start with that bright yellow. I apologize, the guideline here did not print. So you're going to have to fake it. Just guess where it should go based on what the other ones look like. So on the leaves, I just had that be a single stitch. And then for the stem, I switched to back stitch. And what I tried to do is make it so that the joints of the back stitch meet the joints here of where those leaves branch off. So for that first segment, you can fit in 2 stitches. For the next one, I think we can get in 3. But while I'm here, I'm going to add my straight stitches. You'll notice over here, I left a gap for the leaf that's going to be here. Also, you can see I left a gap over here when I did my satin stitch. It's up to you if you want to just completely cover those areas and stitch over them, or if you do want to leave a gap like I did. Did you notice I just messed up? Can you see I didn't actually have those stitches touch? That's okay. So you can't really tell now. Oops. Looks like I need to do some trimming on the back there. I keep grabbing some craziness from the back. Alright, so what I'm going to do is, after I finish, since I already have this floss on my needle, I'm going to show you a couple French knots. So here you kind of have to guess your way over the leaves. So we've already stitched over the guideline. All right. So you can see right now, I've been stitching with 2-ply. Here's my overlapped section. What I'm going to do, rather than like getting a new length of floss, I'm going to go ahead and make sure this is doubled over when I come back through. So I'm kind of like, I'm having to kind of move the floss along. Usually I do the opposite, right? Like as I'm stitching my tail, my overlap tail gets shorter and shorter and shorter and shorter, right? So I'm going to do the opposite. So when I pop back up, I'm going to have 2-ply. So I'm going to pop up. Hopefully I can demo okay in the center of a flower. And if this well, here, let me just show you. So here I have my 4-ply, right? You can see my needle's totally stuck on here. So when I'm done, I'm going to have to cut it off. But that's just like a kind of a cheater way to get 4-ply if you want to just switch while you're doing 2-ply. All right, so I'm going to do a French knot here. You don't have to do French knots in the centers of your flowers. You can just do a single teeny tiny stitch. You could do a colonial stitch, colonial knot. You can do whatever the heck you want. And you can actually do these before you do the petals if you prefer. So to do a French knot, we're just going to do a single wrap because they're easier. So there's my 1 wrap, and then I place my needle in the center of the flower, not right where I went up, but nearby. And then I will tug gently to the left until that knot is resting right where I want it. And I will pull this through just like that. Okay. And I will do one here. I think I might do a double wrap because it'll be a little harder to pull through, but I do have a larger space here to fill. Okay. Also, if you want, so we have these little flowers here. There's one here, let's see, there used to be one over here somewhere, and I think there's another one somewhere. And you can add as many as you want. So here, this is a slightly different design than what we're doing, but I did the pink in the centers. You could also do it with this color in the centers. It really depends on how much you like pink, I guess. So you would just do the same. You could either do just a small stitch there, or you can go ahead and do French knots there. Okay. So now to do the leaves, you can see I already started over here. I actually ended up putting, and it's really up to you if you want to do this or not. I'm using 3-ply, and I'm using 2 of that green, and then the 3rd ply is this bright green color, okay? And that's how I'm getting these kind of stripy leaves. If you like that effect, give it a shot. If you don't, then don't. Or maybe you add a single ply of this color instead of this color so it's not so bright, but it does lighten the leaves and add a little interest. Or just use 3 of the green. So I don't know what this stitch is called yet. Hopefully I'll have a name for it before I write the pattern up, but we're coming up at the top of the leaf. We are weaving underneath that center stitch, and we are going back down, back at the top of the leaf. And I'm just doing that all the way around until I fill the leaf. Weave. So be careful when you're weaving that you don't crash into any of your other stitches. So keep going. You do want to pay attention to your tension here. If you pull too tight, you're not, excuse me, you're going to have to use more stitches. So just be nice and gentle, almost like when we were doing these. It's actually, I mean, if you look at it, it's almost the same thing, right? Except we're sharing that anchor stitch between all of those stitches. So for this one, we have a weird shape to handle, right? This is actually supposed to be underneath this flower. So I was able to fit in 2 stitches. I think as I come down here, I can still keep weaving under here, but what I'm going to have to do is just go down here. And then on this other side, I'm going to have to fake it with just some satin stitches to fill this piece in. I think this is the only one that's a little bit tricky. So I would then continue here. So if it's not working out, feel free to use a different leaf stitch. Fishbone, cretin, leaf stitch. Oops. As we get to the base, our stitches are getting smaller and smaller. And eventually they just turn into tiny satin stitches that tuck underneath that center stitch. The bases of them are a little bit fiddly just because they get so narrow. Once you're done with these, we've pretty much done all the basics. We just get to do the fun stuff, adding in the details. And it's up to you how many of these details you want to add. If you don't want to do any, if you want to do all of them and add your own, it's a good opportunity to make the piece your own. All right, so let's add some detail on these leaves here. So I'm going to start with, not that, I am going to start with, here we go, a single strand of this darker color, and I'm going to come in and kind of add some shading on these leaves. I'm going to start with the one in the back, right? This one's behind this one. And I want them especially towards the bottom to make it look like a shadow. I like to kind of start along the spiky bits, kind of guide myself and to take away any fear of like, oh no, I'm adding stitches on my stitches. Definitely want it here so that I can see that this is behind. So I'm going to do a stitch there and here, meeting back up there. Try to keep your stitch direction consistent with your satin stitches. This one was not. Sorry. It was not. It did not happen for whatever reason. So then I kind of start going in between those and adding some more. These are not. These should be parallel, but they are not. That's okay. It's still gonna look good. As long as they're more or less all, they're all kind of converging in the center. Nothing's too out of place. And again, like, if you don't want these leaves to be very dark, maybe you don't even use the darker color at all. Maybe you just use the lighter color, or maybe you just don't do this. So this back in here, I want to add some extras because this should be, this is like the background, right? So we want to make it a little bit darker. There's not as much light back here. Even way back here. Kind of forget that there was stitches back here. All right, and I'm just gonna stop there. We could always do more, and you can always come back. So I'm gonna go to the other color, a single strand of that, and continue with this color to kind of, oops, I had a little knot in there, but it was not big enough. I'm gonna continue with this color to kind of blend the two together. I'm kind of just going in the gaps And I'm making these ones, when I can, I make them a little bit longer. I like to do this before doing that flower, if possible. So hopefully you kind of get the idea here. This is an opportunity to be more creative and kind of do some freestyle shading here. Again, do as much or little as you would like. I just kind of go until it looks consistent to me. It's definitely hard to undo. I will tell you that. If you come in here and decide, oh my gosh, I hate everything I just did, you're gonna have a hard time getting that out. So you may want to practice it. If you're nervous about it, you can always practice it ahead of time on a sample. Have a sample hoop that you have, kind of like a sketchbook basically for embroidery. So now I'm going to add a little bit of detail to my darker leaves here. This is totally optional. One thing you could do is like in the, let's see, what pattern have we done it in? Many patterns where we've done like fly a stitch on top to do veins. This time I'm going to do wheat ear stitch just because I like it right now. So with wheat ear stitch, we're starting with a V. I'm just using a single ply. You can use this very light green color. If you want something more dramatic, you could use this brighter green color. You could even use white. You could skip this altogether. All right, so we make a little V. It's tricky, right? Because there's no guidelines. You're having to just do it by sight. So in your mind, if you can make an imaginary line down the center, that's what I'm trying to go down. All right, so I'm going to come up, stitch length away, and I'm going to do basically a detached chain stitch using this V as the anchor. Or I guess it wouldn't be, would this be detached? It's basically like reverse, a single reverse chain stitch. And then I will do it again. Again, a little bit tricky because we are having to do it by feel, by sight. An alternative to this would be, like I said, you could do feather stitch on top. You could skip it all together. You could just do straight stitches in whatever kind of pattern or design you want. If you do want to add some detail, but not this specific detail. You can see mine is definitely veering to the left. Let's see if we can recenter it a little bit. Oops. I don't think I mentioned that when we do, after we've done that first stitch, when we come under, we're also going under the previous stitch along with that V. And you can see mine definitely got bigger over time. I don't know if that was on purpose or not. This last one especially. I saw that distance and was like, I just want to do one more. it. So you could have all of them, do that to all of them, do it to one of them, do it to all, just none of them. I said that like 10 times. Okay. Have fun with it. All right, so next I'll just show you these little guys. Actually, I'll show you these pink flowers next. So we're just gonna do straight stitches. We're gonna use a full ply and just have them center. Leaving a little room in the very middle because I may double up. See how it looks here. I actually like that just the way it is. So I know we have one right here as well. So all you can see is the one petal. So you get to be creative. That was the left petal. Here's the top. Oh, excuse me. On the side. And you can just add the ones I have designated here. If you want, you could add even more. You don't have to stick to this color. This is where you get to decorate how you like. Okay, and then I have this big one here. And for this one, we're probably gonna do doubling up like I mentioned. Oops. Don't let that happen. I had this parked off to the side and I just snagged it. So basically we just do two, one on top of the other. And don't pull too tight. You can see I have some puff happening here. I'm just gently tugging. We don't want to lose that. We want some dimension here. You could also, instead of going directly on top, you could do a little bit to the left or a little bit to the right to make these petals look thicker. Or you could think of this as satin stitch petals. Oops. Come here, knot. Uh-oh. There it goes. So you can see how that space I left for myself is coming in handy. Oh, that was really long. Alright, because that one's so long, I'm probably going to have to do a little shaping. I probably should have just undone it, but now I've committed. you come from? So you can just keep adding until you have them how you want them. Who is that? That's probably going to be good enough. I'm afraid if I fiddle too much with it, it'll be a problem. So at this point, you can do these little guys. There's one here, and I think there's just one over here, but you can add more if you want. I think for, let's see, I guess I'll just do a French knot. The center. And then you're going to use your white just to do straight stitch petals. And these, similarly, I'm trying to not pull too hard, although I just got snagged. So it got pulled very tight. Etc. So I hope you have fun with this design. I hope you make it your own. I hope you survive the first flower. I'm glad you stuck around and kept persevering. And I hope you make something beautiful.